Politicians and priests use fear to manipulate people. Fear is a very primal emotion. Traditional religions use fear of divine punishment to keep people in the pews and to fill their donation baskets. Progressives tend to dismiss belief in hell, and many of us, me included, dismiss any belief in life after death. Hence, fear-filled evangelical churches are full, and progressive churches tend to be tiny if they exist at all. Motivating religious people by encouraging compassion and generosity just doesn't have the same motivational power as pitchforks and burning lakes of fire. Religious people invented this non-existent hell so that they could offer the only known insurance against it without ever having to provide any evidence for the existence of hell or any evidence for the efficacy of the cure that they alone offered. It's the biggest scam in history, but maybe only slightly ahead of politicians who promote fear of immigrants. When Donald Trump took his famous escalator ride in 2015 to announce his first candidacy for the presidency, he was such an unlikely and frankly comical candidate that he had to hire unemployed actors to come and swell the crowd in Trump Tower to fake enthusiasm. But he filled his announcement with fear-baiting statements about illegal immigrants, suggesting that they were criminals, rapists, drug dealers, and a genuine threat to everyday Americans. It was an absurd and obviously racist ploy, but as Mark Twain allegedly said, a lie told and stuck to is as good as the truth. And in politics, a lie told and repeated often enough becomes the truth in the minds of many voters. It's not unlike the lie about the existence of an eternal hell filled with impossible pain and torture. Most of the time, when traditional religious people have heard me say that what they have been told about hell is entirely fictitious, that it is a preposterous lie for which there's never been a grain of evidence or the slightest reason to believe that it exists, they get angry at me, as if they want to hold on to their fear of being tortured for all eternity for having lascivious thoughts about their middle school English teacher. Or maybe you didn't go to school when young teachers wore miniskirts and high-heeled boots. People have been so conditioned to be scared of hell and to have moderated their behavior, avoiding all kinds of sins that they would have really liked to indulge in because they were afraid of hell. And if you try to take that irrational fear away from them, rather than being relieved, they're often very angry. And I insist, they have every reason to be angry at all the priests and preachers who have lied to them about it for decades. But rather than being mad at Father O'Connor or Preacher Sidesaddle, they get mad at me for pointing out that the myths just ain't so. People are funny. But when it comes to illegal aliens, let's first deal with some of the facts. Trump has claimed that 21 million people have come across our southern border during Biden's time in office. The truth is that there's not half that many undocumented migrants in the United States from all presidential candidacies or administrations. Still, if it's 10 million, and it's something like that, that's a lot of people. Major cities where most of these migrants show up have some real issues with strains on their public services, such as housing, education, and emergency medical services. I happen to live in a small coastal town in eastern Florida, and while we have a racially diverse community and my neighborhood is integrated, you don't see a lot of immigrants in any one place, not so that you would notice, hey, there's a bunch of immigrants. Unless, of course, one of my neighbors is getting a new roof put on, or if someone is having landscaping work done, or there's some new construction in the area, or painting even, or if someone is getting their house cleaned or their pool serviced. And like in your town, if you go to an Asian or Mexican restaurant, you're likely to encounter Asian or Spanish-speaking servers, cooks, and staff whose legal status you don't know anything about. Even our local French bakery is run by a Lebanese guy. I don't know if he's a citizen or not, but as long as he keeps making those little phyllo dough cookies, he's all right with me. No country can have totally open borders, but countries with advanced economics cannot well survive without a steady supply of workers who are willing to do the low-wage and low-skilled jobs. Is 10 million too many undocumented immigrants? I don't even know how to accurately gauge that. Now, if you're the mayor of New York City and you're having difficulty keeping people from sleeping in the streets and the city parks, maybe that's too many. But what I hear from restaurant owners and construction managers is that they're having difficulty finding enough people who will actually show up to work to keep their business going. And I get that we could wish that people would do all of this legally, that they would come to America having applied for a visa and waiting for it to be granted. But let me just tell you from personal experience, it's not that easy. I adopted my daughter from South Korea 36 years ago, and it took a few $1,000s and 4 months of waiting to get her from Seoul, South Korea to the United States. It felt like an eternity. She was assigned to us in her first week of life, but it took 4 months to get the documents signed and permissions granted for her to make that trans-Pacific flight. And now, adoptive families have to wait much longer. Currently, if you don't mind me revealing a little bit about my personal life, my significant other and I are in the process of obtaining a legal visa for her to move to Florida from Thailand. We've paid several $1,000s in attorney and application fees and have submitted tons of time-consuming paperwork for both of us. And yet our case is very simple. She's never been married and doesn't have children. She isn't trying to bring any family members with her. She is an educated, English-speaking professional with no criminal record and no health issues. And I'm just one of millions of old men living in Florida who has a swimming pool, access to the beach, and time and income on my hands that I would like to spend with someone who also likes to occasionally go to movies and to eat out. We've paid for her medical exam and police background check, and so this is about as easy as immigration gets. However, our documents are at the bottom of a pile of applications. It took me 4 months to get my baby here, but the U.S. Immigration Service currently estimates that even after you have all your paperwork in and all these hoops have been jumped through, that the average wait is still 13 months to get a visa. 13 months, which when you're 68 years old, sounds like a significant portion of the rest of the time that I'm allotted to be on this earth. And that's for an application that is guaranteed to be approved, with lawyers working on both sides of the globe to make it happen. Now, if you're an unemployed farm worker in Nicaragua, watching your wife and children starve to death and living in an area overrun by violent gangs, what are your chances that you could muster the resources to make an entirely legal application to come and pick oranges in Southern California? Republicans and Democrats agree our immigration system is broken because it is so absurdly difficult, expensive, and time-consuming. Temporary workers come over the border any way they can. Still, I don't think this is a problem that would be that hard to solve if we were determined to solve it. The Immigration Office could, especially considering the fees they charge, hire a few more people to work on the backlog of applications gathering dust on their desks so that grumpy old men don't have to go to movies alone, and there should be pretty quick processing for workers who have eager employers waiting to hire them in the USA to bring in all of the crops that are rotting in their fields. Getting a temporary work visa should be easy. Now, I'm just a dumb country preacher, but I could generate the proper forms and procedural manuals in less than a week. So hire me, President Trump, and I could make your administration look like it verged on competence in your first month in office. Oh, and all of this hand-wringing panties in a wad talk about illegals coming and voting in our elections. Yeah, folks, that doesn't happen. It can't happen. When my intended is able to come to the United States, evidently sometime at the end of 2025, she will have to live here for 5 years before she can apply for citizenship, and if she is successful in gaining citizenship, then and only then will she be able to vote for the mayor of Vero Beach, Florida. And just for free, everyone who has ever told you that these undocumented immigrants are pouring over the borders and voting in our elections, they knew that they were lying to you. They lie to you because they think you are stupid enough to believe them. So please, prove them wrong. And if, as some political talking heads have suggested, inflation in the grocery store was the single leading factor in Kamala Harris's defeat, what do the Trump people think will happen to produce prices when they deport 70 to 80% of the farm workers who pick our fruits and vegetables? Right now, the USA is the most agriculturally advanced country in the world, but take away our labor force and see where we stand in global agriculture 6 months from now. One of my former neighbors from Joplin, Missouri, Jessie Meemer, who is famous only for her viral social media rants, recently put to bed another silly rumor about migrants taking up welfare and food stamp money. She said, "Can I tell you a secret? I don't care if there are undocumented immigrants in this country. I think it's a non-issue. Without Social Security numbers, they're not getting the welfare people claim they're getting. The vast majority of them are normal people trying to live a better life. This whole wall, deport the illegals bullshit is just 1% convincing the working poor to blame the subset of the working poor for the fact that they're all poor, instead of realizing that they're all poor due to the vast income inequality and resource price inflation in combination with wage stagnation. The existence of another poor person is not why you are poor. It's because the people who control everything refuse to increase your wages." For the final point I want to make on immigration, I have to acknowledge a lecture I heard by Richard Wolff, emeritus economics professor at Boston University. I have to acknowledge him even though the basic math and logic of it is so simple we should all have realized it on our own. But some things are as plain as the nose on your face. But you may have noticed it isn't always easy to see the nose on your face. Wolff points out that the first 17 or 18 years of anyone's life is their most expensive years. Children have to be housed, fed, educated, medically cared for, clothed, and yet they produce no useful labor. Whether you grow up in Europe or North America or in some profoundly impoverished country, your first 17 years require massive investment from someone to get you ready to enter the workforce. So every single time A migrant crosses our borders to come here to work, someone somewhere else has already made a huge investment in them, getting them to the age where they can come and pick peaches and apples and the even more backbreaking work of picking strawberries and green beans. And if they can nail shingles to a roof, mix concrete, plant landscaping, or clean a hotel room, so much the better. And that's without even considering the physical therapists, physicians, psychiatrists, engineers, and IT experts that we need to run our economy, which our universities failed to produce in numbers enough to keep us at the head of the line of development. We have lots of literature and art history grads, but not the kinds of scientists and inventors that we need to keep our economy competitive. So men and women, we don't need to build a wall. We don't need mass deportations. And we really don't need for you to be afraid of the hysterical lies you've been told about undocumented workers coming into your kitchen and slitting your throat. Do America a favor. Be a rational, critical thinker, and be willing to, as the Bible has told us for centuries, to welcome the stranger among us as one of our own. I've said it before, but let me say it again. You aren't going to go to hell. Neither is anyone else, and some days I'm kind of sorry about that because there are some people that really ought to just go to hell. But there isn't one for them to go to. And immigrants have to be limited in number, but that number is a whole lot higher than what you've been led to believe. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by going along with mass deportations unless you want to pay a lot more for groceries, lawn care, construction, and wait a lot longer for an appointment to see a cardiologist or an oncologist. In general, I just want you to stop being afraid.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.